All right, folks. Cam Cote coming back at you from the Pro Life Guys podcast. We're doing something a little bit special, a little bit different now. This is a YouTube only bonus episode where we kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on the show about people in the pro life movement and talk a little bit with friends of the movement about what's going on behind the scenes. A little bit more of a humanizing thing. Hopefully, you get to learn a little bit about me, a little bit about the folks that are part of the global pro life movement and what keeps us rolling in the right direction. Joined today by my wonderful friend, editor, producer. I don't know all the other names that I should be giving to you, Maddie. Maddie Halleck, how you doing, buddy?
Dude, I'm doing so good. It's always such a wonderful time when we can speak together. I really miss you now that we're not on the front lines of the same battle, but I'm so thankful every time. You are the most gracious person because every time you record an interview or do an episode, you just give a shout out to me, and it's just the perfect words of encouragement to keep me going. So I really appreciate it.
Well, you are most welcome there. Very well deserved. For anyone who's new, Maddie is the brains behind the operation. I get to go in front of the camera. Maddie does all the stuff behind the scenes to make it sound good and look good and all that kind of stuff. And so I can't thank you enough, Maddie, for everything and also all the wisdom and creativity behind it as well. As I've shared on the show a few times, this was never supposed to be my podcast at all. But here I am. Alas, alack, here we are. The
Yeah.
good Lord doesn't call the capable. He tries to equip blunt tools like me. So
Yes,
here we are.
exactly. Yeah, dude,
Um,
I very much feel you. I feel like even this was very ad hoc, right? Just so everybody
yeah.
knows, the whole podcast thing was we were seriously throwing our hands up in the air. COVID hit. We could not do outreach like we wanted to do as CCBR, so we needed to find alternative methods to reach people about our message and educate them and equip them with the tools that they need to speak eloquently about pro-life issues and everything. So that's where we were like, well, this is an opportunity, I guess, for us to figure this out. And we literally learned on the go, right? Like, I had never done any production stuff like this. You
Yeah.
had never done a podcast. We just faked it until we made it. And
Until
that's
we made it.
yeah, dude. So I feel that it was very ad hoc, but the Lord has blessed it, and the amazing part
Oh,
is it's become a great tool. I know for you
yeah.
guys at CC Bar, you guys have had some people listen. You have this like wonderful now cachet of evergreen content that you can get people to listen to. So, in the Lord's providence, it's worked out well, and it's been a good fun time and a good tool for people.
Oh, amen. And it's been so cool on a couple fronts. I share often it's been so cool going door knocking, doing CSPR outreach, and literally meeting people at the doorstep, being like, I recognize your voice. How do I know you? And now I've literally met two people who know me through the podcast,
Yeah.
and in some ways kind of bringing people together as well. It's been I've told a ton of people that you want to meet your heroes, you start a podcast because
Hmm.
unless you're way cooler probably than you or I are, you're probably able to get basically anybody that you admire on your podcast because they're very available. I've been blessed to be able to talk to Lila Rose and Scott Klusendorf and all these heroes, Josh Brom and countless others and
Hmm.
whatnot. And that's a little bit of your story too, right? I mean, you've been podcasting for way longer than I have. Both are you still doing the Great Exchange with Nick, or are you is that kind of
So
wrapped up a little bit as you've pivoted?
yeah, so as I've pivoted, we've kind of wrapped that up a bit. I think the intention, Lord willing, is to pick it up again.
Okay.
We're just both in the kind of a same season of life as far as being very busy. Nick and I both just had our first daughters, who are now Nick's daughter is coming on a year old. Mine's
Okay.
just above that. So it was just a busy time. I was moving, he was moving, a lot of balls up in the air, and it was just something that we were always striving to do the best content, and we didn't want to
Mm,
just put out content for content's sake, and
yeah.
kind of just like shoehorn it into our schedules. So that's where we just decided, you know what, we're both really busy at this time, and Lord willing, if it's His will, we will pick it up in the future. And it was a wonderful time. I think we had so many great episodes, great content. I got to meet a bunch of my heroes, like you said, and that's only continued as far as my work with LCC now, just getting to interview people who are way smarter than me and way more articulate, and just getting to learn from them. And the best part is, like, you know, it's not only getting to talk to them, but, you know, you can, as is the case with you, is like you become friends with these people that you've admired, and it is kind of this wonderful symbiotic relationship, because you can pour into them, they can pour into you. And I think that's what a lot of people need to know, is like a lot of the people in our spaces, right, in Christian networks and Christian ministries, though they might have a large following, they're just regular people. And that's kind of what you get to learn when you have conversations with a bunch of them. And it's really cool to get that opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. And bounce ideas back and forth for leadership and creativity and all these kinds of things, right? We talk on the Pro Life Guys podcast about how audience members, how valuable it can be to form community and not live in isolation, that kind of thing. And like, yes, I love my colleagues at CCBR, and it's phenomenal to work with some of the best human beings that I've ever met. And yet it's also refreshing to be able to talk with other leaders in the movement and be like, hey, like, how are you navigating these challenges when it comes to like HR struggles and like how do you stay fresh without needing to be fresh, kind of thing? How do you continue to engage the culture in the way that they need to be engaged without just reinventing the wheel for its own sake? And it's really, really cool to spend that extra half hour outside of a recording, talking with people, picking their brains, all that kind of thing. I got to ask, so with the LCC podcast, give me top 2 or 3 people that you've gotten to meet and really kind of hit it off with. Maybe not the top 2 or 3 highest profile people per se, but like who's somebody that you've gotten to chat with that you're like, holy cow, there's something cool here. We are actually connecting on a friendship level. Who stands out in your mind?
So it's funny that you asked that, because, you know, it wouldn't be the highest profile, but a guy like Bruce Pardy. So Bruce Pardy's a law professor at the Queen's University. We've quite often gone back and forth, and it's the type of thing, I'm sure you've had this, Cam, with some interviews, where it's like you finish the interview and then you have another hour conversation, because and then you're like, oh shoot, we should have recorded that because it had great content. So Bruce has become a friend, and it's interesting too, because, you know, Bruce is more of a kind of classical liberal guy. I'm not even sure of his faith background and stuff like that, but he's a very insightful man, a brilliant legal mind, and he understands the season. He understands the worldviews that are underneath a lot of the cultural battles that we have going on right now. So even though that we have disagreements, it's always really so interesting to talk to him. Like it's just one of those conversations. And now, because you're a great interviewer, Cam, it seems like all your conversations are like this. It's just one question just naturally flows to another. But so he's been great to talk to. Like, I mean, I've got to become like we did. CBC did a hit piece on Liberty Coalition Canada. They called us out by name. They tried to make it seem like we were a secret cabal of radical fundamentalist Christians who were trying to take over Canada, and we were well funded. Meanwhile, we have like 3 people. You know,
and that's the only error, right? The radical fundamentalist Christians that want to take over Canada. It's just the funding part that they're off on, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I said a long time ago, I want to become everything that CBC accuses me of, except for like the more salacious, like unfounded things like white supremacists or I mean, that's not even rooted in reality. But it was really great. Like, we did a joint podcast with Dr. Joseph Boot of the Ezra Institute, one of my heroes of the faith. Doug Wilson was also on that podcast because he was slandered in it. We've interviewed guys like Jeff Durbin of Apologia Radio, Dr. P. Andrew Sandlin. Mike just did an interview with John Cooper from Skillet. I don't know if there's any hard rock fans, but yeah, we've had like there's been a really wide range of people that we've got to talk to. AJ Hurley from Live Action. You've interviewed Lila Rose. That was one where because they were touching on abortion, I was just behind the scenes producing, and they pulled me in. Like AJ's like, you have to be on the podcast, dude. So like those, yeah. I mean, there's so many fun conversations and wonderful conversations, and I'm glad that it's interesting, Cam, in the freedom movement, whatever you want to make of that, writ large. Not everybody is pro-life, right? That tends to be kind of those people who are more consistent worldview Christian thinkers who hold that conviction. But a lot of people who are in this freedom movement haven't come to that conviction that life begins at conception, and we shouldn't directly intentionally kill a living innocent human being. So it's been really cool from my perspective, because a lot of what I learned working with you guys at CCBR, I've been able to interject into the content at LCC and further that argument. Like we had a debate or a kind of back and forth conversation with Max Bernier on his position, on his view of the pro-life issues. And it was really a candid conversation where, Max, though he doesn't make a commitment to be a Christian or to be fully pro-life, in talking to the conversation, he was really candid. He said, "Hey, look, I got into politics as a finance guy in Quebec. We don't even talk about abortion in Quebec. It's a foregone conclusion. Now that CCBR is in Quebec, hopefully we'll talk about it more. But he's like, that wasn't even on my radar. I just got in. I was a PC in Quebec. That's what I did, and then it was only when I became a leader of the PPC that I actually said, I guess I have to come to a conviction on this issue, right? So it's like really cool, candid conversations with people about those issues, and then being able to, like, from the pro-life perspective, be able to show people from Liberty Coalition perspective how the most fundamental freedom of all human beings is the right to life. Without the right to life, every other freedom is superfluous. So if we truly want to be a part of the freedom movement, if we truly want to fight for what's good and just in our society, then we have to defend the most defenseless, the weakest among us, which are the preborn children. So that's where it's kind of like, it's been an amazing opportunity to get to talk to all these people, but then also a platform to utilize the skills that you guys taught me so well with CCBR.
Oh, absolutely. And that's so cool that you've got that opportunity. You're taking advantage of that too, right? I mean, we've talked about the church as being like the sleeping giant in the pro-life movement for so long. And yet you look at the freedom movement and the hundreds of thousands of people that have built into that. And like you said, so many of them are not cognizant, not actively engaging on the abortion issue. And in a lot of ways, in my mind at least, they have supplanted the church as the lowest hanging fruit. That's not to say that we don't need to engage the church. I'm so glad that we're engaged in the church, but looking at so many of the people that I talk to at churches when I give presentations, I'm sure similar for you, that the idea of whether it be public protest or public engagement in any capacity has been so long off of their radar that you're trying to light a fire under them while also equipping them with the tools that they need to kind of respond to it. Whereas a lot of the folks who have been involved in this freedom movement are already up off the couch. They're already gung-ho. They've already got a fire lit, and you just need to point them in the right direction, right? And so that it presents a really, really cool opportunity.
Exactly. And, I'm thankful that a large portion of the freedom movement happens to be Christians who are waking up and starting to understand the ramifications of the lordship of Jesus Christ over all of life, and are trying to declare all of Christ for all of life and what that actually means in political action. But you're right. It is an uphill battle. If all the churches who were faithful and true across, not only Canada, but the globe would speak up on issues like abortion, euthanasia, all these hot button issues, our culture would look really different. And now, my friend Dr. Aaron Rock, who I've had the opportunity to become friends with, and he's mentors me, and that's all part of starting the podcast, getting to meet these people. He's said something really brilliant, and I think churches are really, they're kind of weary about wading into political issues, right? Maybe you can understand it. I think that's bad theology, mind you, and we want to correct a lot of that thinking. But what his point is, listen, these aren't political issues. When we're talking about human sexuality, when we're talking about the right to life, these are basic, fundamental, metaphysical, ontological issues that touch the heart of Scripture and how God's created us to live in the world. They've become politicized, but they are not rightly understood political issues. They're actually pre-civic issues. They're religious issues that we need to speak out about, lest we be found unfaithful in our tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at that as like, these may be issues that have political ramifications. They might be human issues, and because humans have so many touch points with politics, because that's the way that our world does and needs to work. There's a ton of stuff that has political ramifications, right? I mean, soup kitchens,
of course,
have political ramifications, and all kinds of the economy, all these kinds of things have political ramifications. Being able to paint something as a purely political issue, I mean, I think that like the salaries of politicians might be one of the only pure political issues that like doesn't actually have touch points with anybody else, and that kind of thing. And but cool. I'm going to change gears on you a little bit here, Matty, because these episodes I want to have as kind of a back and forth. Not
we're making
only
it up as we go.
We're making it up as we go, and the idea of like pulling screen back and not just having another shop talky kind of vibe, but also like mixing some shop talk into some other stuff. And I want to go into maybe what is fueling some of the thought behind this and whatnot. I want to go literature. I love talking to people about books, and I know that you're a book guy, and I want to go I know that obviously probably for Liberty Coalition and also just in life in general, you're probably crushing a bunch of really good books, and probably not quite as many as you'd like, especially
never as many as I like, but
never as many as you'd like. But I wanted to kind of start pivoting off that route and just kind of pull the veil back. Okay, you clock out. I don't know if you probably don't have a punch clock. I'm sure most of our audience has no idea what a punch clock is, but when you tell yourself that you're punching out from work and that you're gonna kids in bed, you are laying back on the couch, what are you pulling off the shelf right now? Like what are you diving into at this point?
Well, I'm kind of a guy who I don't really dabble in a lot of fiction. It's pretty much non-fiction for me. Lately, so last year I challenged myself read 52 books in a year. I got to 50, nice. I think 55, 54. Okay. So I finished that challenge. But this year I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the 52 books again, part of being in a young family, but I want to read some of the big tomes, like some of the big books that I haven't got to. So I just recently read through, what is it? History of Western Philosophy and Theology by John Frame. So that was a really good read. I'm going through his systematic theology right now, so it's just I can pull it off the shelf. It's just a massive tome here. So I'm getting really into a lot of Frame's work, just because I got it, and I'm probably going to go through Rushdoony's Institutes of Biblical Law after I'm done that. So that's kind of they're not really accessible books, unfortunately. I will say I just want to. What is one of the ones that I really. Speaking of Dr. P. Andrew Sandlin, I really benefited from this little book, very accessible, called A Creational Worldview. And this is just really kind of an introduction to the importance of worldview thinking and thinking Christianly about all areas of life. And he just really puts that through the frame of how we were created in God's image. And so I found that was really helpful. And that's probably one of the most accessible books that I've read lately, for most people that don't want to read like multi-thousand page systematic theologies. But with that being said, there's so many good books out there that I would highly recommend. Dr. Joe Boots' Ruler of Kings was also one that I just pounded through, and it's awesome. So I would recommend those. Also, Mission of God by Joe Boot is just a classic. So that's a big one that I went through. So.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a weird person as far as literate. Like I just read these big, massive theological and philosophical works, but keeps my brain going. So
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the brain's not going a whole ton during the. No, I'm kidding. I was gonna say, like, I got so much respect for people that can crush like a full day's work in the muck and the mire of the culture war, put their kid to bed, and dive straight back into that. I used to be into. I thought that it was a good system. I would be on a 4-book rotation or a 4 kind of style rotation where I would do fiction written in the last 100 years, nonfiction written in the last 100 years, fiction written more than 100 years ago, nonfiction written more than 100 years ago.
Is that playing off of like Lewis's, like because he was specifically outspoken about like you need to read old books,
Exactly.
Things that are not crystallized in your moment, so you can have a wider perspective.
Yes, and try to combo the two of them because
Yes.
while I got a huge amount of appreciation for older literature and styles and whatnot, I think there is a tremendous amount of value in reading contemporary stuff as well, if at the very least for seeing where things are at now and gaining vantage points into contemporary literature and the way that the world is currently working. I mean, I love me some good depressing Russian fiction, but I also love me some good depressing contemporary fiction. I mean, reading stuff a class like I think about like contemporary classics. I'm very confident that 100 years from now, The Kite Runner, books like that are still going to be talked about, and books like that might be very well celebrated for good reason. And looking at Do Not Say We Have Nothing, or what's the other Never Let Me Go is a movie now. I've never seen the movie, but I've read the book, and it's a crazy one. And looking at, okay, what are books? What are the books that are getting awards right now, and why are they getting awards? And sometimes I hate them. Sometimes I hate them very deeply, and sometimes I love them because they offer me a different kind of perspective. I can only endure Charles Dickens's politics for so long before I need to hear something a little bit more contemporary. But yeah, it's interesting trying to get a mix.
Yeah, no, and it's funny that you say that because so my wife and I will read or listen to audiobooks together, and that's the way that we kind of approach it. Like we do,
Okay.
if I'm gonna read or listen to fiction, it's generally with my wife, and because we kind of rotate like like an autobiography type kind of historical book with like a philosophical or theological book, and then we throw like 1 or 2 fictions in there as well. I've actually started, like, though I don't read a lot of fiction, I think I'm gonna come around to that eventually, like as I start making my way through some other stuff, because I've been listening to a podcast called Stories Are Soul Food by N.D. Wilson and what's his co-host, and they talk a lot about, ND is himself a writer, and they talk a lot about how stories are just that. They're soul food. They're like eating, like digesting something for the soul. And they talk about how to properly interpret art through the grid of what's good, true, and beautiful that aligns with a Christian worldview. And they really delve into all sorts of art, and they kind of show how like they analyze the media, the skill that's gone into it, the skill of the writing, and then also whether or not the story is objectively true, good, and beautiful. So it is very fascinating to kind of listen to like authors like and his co-host that I can't remember the name of, he's like an editor, he's a professional editor, so it's interesting to hear them have conversations about like the anatomy of a good story and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean Matt Fradd and our friend and colleague Jonathan talks
Mhm.
often about good literature, and he's got a lot of, I mean, those are my favorite publications. Jonathan, if you're listening, those are my favorite ones. You know this already. I am so knee deep in the culture war that I don't need to hear about more stuff that's happening in Norway or whatever.
Yeah.
I need a good pick me up of Laura Ingalls Wilder or something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's a ton of value in that. And I've really gotten into fantasy a lot. I know that a lot of literature snobs will kind of turn their nose up at fantasy because it kind of gets outside of the historical fiction or autobiography kind of
Oh.
stuff. I love it. And
Yeah.
I mean, doing that journey from C.S. Lewis and Narnia into Tolkien and beyond
Mhm.
that. And there's a huge realm beyond Tolkien as well that I would highly encourage.
Yeah.
Weird one
Yeah.
for you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, like, fantasy. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that some of the greatest Christian authors have delved into fantasy
Yeah.
and creating these big worlds. Because I
Mhm.
think there's something that is good, true, and beautiful about it. And I think people a lot of times, like, turn up their nose to fantasy because it has magic, and that's what I've appreciated stories or soul food for, because they like Andy's like everything's magic. It's like
Mm.
um like Starlight makes this apple, and then I eat this apple, and then I get energized so that I can do like, he's like, if you think of like we live in a magic world, we just are so
Yeah.
used to it, it's become mundane. But yeah, it's just a good perspective to have, so I can appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I got strong feelings on this. I got to ask you. So you're pulling off these gigantic volumes off the shelf and that kind of thing. Somebody asked you, like, "Hey, Maddie, like, how do you even get to that level? How do you become a reader of high fiction, high nonfiction? How do you get to that point? Because I've had a lot of friends that have like never picked anything up apart from like manga, and then they're like, "Hey, I want to read Dostoevsky." Or like, hey, I've never read anything except for like the little excerpt at the end of my bulletin, and I want to dive into this like hardcore theology book. Like, what have you ever had anyone approach you on that? And if so, like, what kind of suggestions do you have for how people can grow in their appreciation? Because I mean, I was that guy as well. I went into like, hey, I got to read theology
Mm,
and cards on the table. As a Catholic guy, I read a lot of Catholic theology as well, and people have this impression
fair
like
enough.
JP2, like the people's pope, whatever. He's got to be an easy read as well, and like JP2 is not an easy read for anybody
Mhm.
who's read him, and like I try to dive right into that, and yet it's kind of like exercise of any other muscle, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if you just decide like, hey, I want to roll off my couch and like start playing in the NHL, or I'm going to roll off my
Yeah.
couch and like run a marathon, that's not how you do it, and that
No.
isn't to say that you have to like trudge through all of the garbage that's written today.
Mhm.
But what is your approach when it comes to like, hey, I somebody wants to read good books, but they're not at that level yet. How do they get there? What's the
Yeah.
training regime?
Plot along, like,
Yeah,
just plot it, like, that's just stick with it, honestly. Like,
yeah.
that's, it's like you said, it's like it's a muscle that you have to train. Plot along. Don't also think that you have to read one book from cover to the end of
Mm,
it and before you get onto another one. Like, I quite often have like 3 or 4 books on the go at every one time, like at every time, because it just helps me, like, something doesn't get stale, you can you pick up the books for
yeah.
different reasons. So like I quite often intersperse like physical copies, especially books that I really, really want to dig into. I'll, marginal notes,
Mm,
annotate, like, do all that stuff, stickies, all that stuff. But I also intersperse with audiobooks. So like a book that you like, a biography or something like that, I don't need to have that level of depth of knowledge of what that person's done in their life. So it's like I'll listen to an audiobook. So that's quite often what I would do, is I would have probably 2 hard copy books that I'm just plotting through, chapter here, chapter there. I have my iPad that I read before going to sleep. And then I have like one or two audiobooks that I'll listen to while I'm doing other things. There's also this app called Speechify that I use too,
Okay.
that really helps. They actually, I think they are now integrated with Kindle, so you can actually use Speechify with your Kindle books. So that really helps. I because I played in bands and I learned to play drums through listening. I have a really good auditory memory, so like I actually can digest books pretty well by hearing. So that's kind of what I do. But like you said, it's just a muscle. Like you just have to start somewhere. Don't start on Dostoevsky. Don't start on Milton. Don't start
Yeah.
on. Don't start on like
Kierkegaard or something. Yeah.
on Calvin or Burkov or. But I will. So the one thing. So I'm going through John Frame's systematic theology. If you want to have a very readable, understandable systematic theology, I don't think you can do better than John Frame. He speaks in very plain language as much as you can when you're getting into philosophy and theology. I think sometimes philosophers, especially modern philosophers, they tended to wax eloquent, and it does make it very hard to get into what they're saying. Like a guy like Hegel, he's so hard to understand that there's literally like two opposed camps of his thought, right? That's not the way Christians should write. That's not the way we should communicate, right? So, I mean, just plod along, one step in front, one foot in front of the other, and you'll get there. You'll become more conversant with reading and the like. That's the beautiful part about reading is you're like entering into a conversation that's happened in very different ways through many different people over the millennia history that we've gone through. And that's why it's like a very powerful tool, because when you're marking up a book, you're engaging in a conversation with the author. And that's why it's like, yeah, if you want to start reading, start easy, work your way, and keep plodding along. It's amazing read 10 pages at a time. If that's all you can do, read 10 pages at a time. It'll take you a while to get through a book, but you'll probably read, 10 books a year. That's better than not reading any. So
Exactly.
yeah.
I think so much through the lens, Maddie, another shared passion of yours, minor sports, and I
Oh
think so
yeah.
often through that sports and exercise kind of realm, and like I was not a reader
Mm-hmm.
until my wife and I got engaged. Realistically, that I can count probably on my fingers the number of books that I read for pleasure before I turned like 22,
Yeah.
and it's only been really in the last 10, 12 years that I have become a more avid reader. And I think that a lot of what you share makes a ton of sense. And I think about when it comes to exercise, first of all, there isn't a whole lot of shame in doing what you enjoy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like sure, there's some books that like are not worth reading, and it should be fairly obvious that they're not worth reading, right? It's going to be fairly surface level that like this is not worth my time, this is not helping me be a better human, this is not helping me
Mm-hmm.
love God better, kind of thing. But I think that, you know what, just like in exercise, like if you love the wind on your face while you're skating on a pond, then that's how you should start exercising. If you
Yes.
love swimming, if you love whatever, and so don't let other people dictate. But did you know that rowing on an erg is the pinnacle of exercise? Like
Yeah.
I hate rowing on an erg. Like why would I
Yeah.
ever do that? Or like
Yeah.
if you don't like running, why are you going to make that your primary form of exercise? And so if you already enjoy reading something,
Mm-hmm.
start getting back into reading by reading more of that. And
Oh,
then
for
as
sure.
you start expanding your horizons, like you said, it is better to read slow than it
Mm-hmm.
is to not read at all. My
And
my dad jokes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's a principle that you can apply to all of life. And
yeah.
like one of my like besetting sins is like I feel like I'm super undisciplined. I have a million things going on. I need to be more organized. I need to be more thoughtful. And it's just like, but it's amazing what you can do if you just keep faithfulness in the same direction over a long period of time is an amazing principle that will get a
Yeah.
lot of stuff done. And that's something like especially in our movements with a lot of people who listen to this, we're idealistic. We really want so we want to see big changes, sweeping But the way that the Spirit of God works in your life is bit by bit, progressively moving you forward and shaping you in the image and the likeness of Christ. It's not, you don't immediately reach consummation, right? God's, in His wisdom, has seen it fit to slowly and progressively shape us into the image of Christ. So don't be discouraged by small beginnings, right? The scriptures say, don't despise the day of small beginnings. And I think as Christians, we are so inactive in a lot of areas of our lives because we do despise those days. Oh, the culture war looks hopeless. We might as well not sit on the couch and eat Cheetos and not do anything, right? That's, and I felt that. I know you probably have at times too, Cam. Like, oh, it's a one step forward, two steps back. But I mean, a guy like Wilberforce and the passion of the Methodists there in England, they fought tooth and nail for decades to see the change that they saw, and we can see that with the overturn of Roe v. Wade recently. All those things that. Faithfulness in the same direction over a long period of time is it's amazing what God can do with it. So yeah, good principle to take forward.
Amen. And let's start acting on that principle. So I'm going to throw some out to you in the audience. Maddie, you're welcome to join as well if you would like. But this is an opportunity for people in the audience. This is something that I've been thinking. I've done this on a few occasions before, and I would love to throw it open to the audience to try to build a little bit of community within the pro-life guys and Christian conservative circles, that kind of thing. Here's the announcement. We're going to start a book club. We're going to start a book club that is going to meet once a month. And it is going to be a different kind of book club than a lot of people have been a part of. Most people, when they join a book club, you have to agree on a book and you're all reading the same book and you're all kind of debating back and forth the insights and whatever about that book. And it's a nightmare. I don't know how many people have had good experiences with books, book clubs like that. I'm sure some people have. There's going to be a different kind of book club. How this book club is going to work is that we're going to meet once a month. We'll do a poll. We're going to put a Google form in the show notes below. And if you want to be a part of the book club, you can submit not an application, but just hit me up, let me know, and we'll figure out when we're going to do it. We're going to do it once a month, probably something like that. And everyone's going to read whatever book they want to read. And all it is we're all going to get together and we're going to share about the books that we're reading. And you're going to get a couple minutes to share, hey, this is the book that I'm reading. Do you like it? Do you not like it? What do you think is going to happen next? We're going to try to avoid a few spoilers because hopefully we're going to give a bit of a review of like, hey, I think other people should read this book as well. Hey, I don't think other people should read this book as this was highly recommended to me. I don't highly recommend it. I do highly recommend it, whatever. And then not only do we get to come together and kind of steel sharpen steel kind of thing, but also hopefully get to hear about a bunch of other books. The only rule, and this is going to sound, I hope this doesn't make me a heretic or a blasphemer or anything like that. The only rule is that the book that you get to come and talk about can't be the Bible. The assumption is that you are going to be reading the Bible on your own anyway. And the same thing goes if you're listening and you're not Christian, if you're Muslim, we're not talking about the Quran either. This isn't to avoid religious conversation. Please read religious books and read whatever commentaries on your religious books, all that kind of stuff. It's just a matter of hopefully this is a foregone conclusion that you are reading the Bible, you are reading the central scripture, documents, whatever of your faith. Let's go beyond that. Let's go beyond that and have that as kind of the base standard and assumption and then go beyond it. So that's the only rule. The book that you're talking about is not just and like I hope that's not weird to say, and hopefully we're not cutting this out, Maddie. But
no. Like I think the assumption is that you should be living in the Bible, right? But visiting other books, and we're doing a book club vacation, right? The ones that we visit. So yeah, no, that's good. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, so there's going to be in the show notes below, there's going to be how you can sign up to be part of it. We'll talk once we get a handful of people. I think that because we're going to be meeting virtually, I'm going to cap it maybe at the first 10 people, maybe 12 people. I've never done a successful kind of dialogue discussion kind of group with significantly more than that. So you know what, if you are listening to this 3 weeks after posting, a month after posting, still fill out the form, and maybe we break out into a couple different groups, and I'm not a part of all of them, but we're just bringing people together to share about literature and good stuff like that. And so, yeah, if you're interested in either sharing about books that you're already reading or curious about getting recommendations and want to grow in your literary travels, please do join in. And with that, Maddie, I super appreciate you joining in with me. This has been a blast. I'm sure that we
Dude.
could talk all morning.
Yeah, we
And yet,
literally could.
as a pilot project, I think it's good to kind of leave it here.
Yes.
I think we're at like what 45 minutes as
Yeah.
an episode. This is going to be something that you and I hopefully do occasionally. I'll be doing this with a few other people. Maddie, maybe even you do a few with folks in your network that go up on this show as well. But yeah, thanks a ton. And any
Dude,
parting words
anytime.
of wisdom, anything that you sitting heavy on your heart or joyfully on your brain that we should send off with.
No, I just want to thank you, Cam, for all the work that you've done on the podcast. And you're a busy dude. I know you have so many, responsibilities with CCBR. So I've enjoyed watching you create all this content, and it's helped me, and I know it's helped so many other people. So, I'm thankful for you. Miss my CCBR family. It's sad not to go shoulder to shoulder with you, but it's great to be still involved in this small way. And hey, if you're listening, share the content, because Cam's doing great work and you want to get it out to more people. So yeah, and if you are into news and analysis from a Christian worldview, do check out Liberty Dispatch on Rumble. Please do that, and the link will be in the I guess the show description below. Because we hopefully can help wade into some of these culture war issues in a similar way to the way that Cam approaches it. So thanks, dude, for having me on. And also, if you like fantasy hockey and you want to partake in a league, to hit us up as well, because Cam and I love sports, and the sad part is apparently not a lot of pro-lifers are that into sports. So it's always hard for us to get a league together, because it's like, I'm not really into that. But Cam and I are super competitive. We will probably beat you, but that's okay. We still want you to come and hang out with us and partake in that.
Absolutely. Let's make that the postscript right here. Fantasy sports. So I've been doing fantasy sports for the last 4 years now. My man Alvaro got me into it. I am into my third season of fantasy baseball. I'm in the finals right now, the championship.
Nice.
I'm going to say I'm probably going back to back. I won my league last year. I'm winning the league this year. But these are just public leagues. And public leagues are only so much fun, because you go into public league and you've got 12 teams in it, and only 4 people care, and that kind of thing. And there's no banter. There's no notice board and people going back and forth. And if it is, then half the time it's like wildly inappropriate and you got to block them anyways. But yeah, you and I and a few others, we did a fantasy hockey league last year, and it was a blast. It was super cool. It was all pro-life people from within the movement. It was a ton of fun.
So if you want to be a part of it, let us know. Reach out to Cam if you want to be a part of a book club or fantasy hockey, because we want to hang out with you. We want to create rivalries and friendships and all the like. So, dude, thank you for having me on this pilot episode. It's a lot of fun.
It's a joy. Okay. And God bless y'all in the audience, wherever you're at, however many hours left in your day.